Yeah. So, good morning, all. Welcome, all of you, to this session. I'm glad to introduce my fellow colleague, Dr. Sipsankar Padi. Not only is my colleague at Triple IT Dharwad, but we both of us studied PhD almost simultaneously. Though he studied PhD in biomedical domain, I was studying PhD in speech in the same laboratory at IIT Guwahati called as Electromedical and Speech Technology Lab, or in short, we used to call it as EMST Lab. So we were sitting together next to each other for almost more than 2 years, if I correctly remember. Yeah. So with that, I'll introduce Dr. Sipsankar Padi. He received the BTech degree in Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering from Biju Patnaik University of Technology, that is BPOT, Rourkela, Odisha, in the year 2009. And MTech degree, so he was a silver medalist in Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering from Veer Surendra Sai University of Technology, Buria, Odisha in 2011, and PhD degree in Electronics and Electrical Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati in the year 2017. Then later, he worked as a postdoctoral researcher in Department of Electrical Engineering, KU Leuven, Belgium, in the Biotensors project from June 2017 to November 2018. Later, he moved to Vellore Institute of Technology, where he worked as an assistant professor in the School of Electronics from December 2018 to January 2021. Currently, he is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering. His research interests include biomedical signal processing, tensor decompositions, transform domain analysis, and machine learning. So, with that, he'll be mainly talking today on matrix to tensor decompositions theory and their applications in biomedical signal processing. Uh, and moreover, I would like to thank him for almost taking the full burden of organizing this workshop with us. I request Dr. Sipsankar Padi to take over this session. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, sir, for this warm and welcome and nice introduction. But am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you once again. So, yes, a very good morning. And is my screen visible?
Yes, screen is visible.
Full screen, side movements.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is full screen.
Yeah, a very good morning to one and all present here. For me, it's pleasure to be here to talk this program on matrix to tensor decompositions theory and their applications in biomedical signal processing. So here I would like to talk about some key tools on matrix and tensor algebra. Also, I would like to show you how to make these tools interpretable from clinical context. So as you see from the title, it is related to mathematics, specifically to linear algebra. But as this program is related to signal processing and machine learning, I won't give much emphasis on mathematics part, but as it is important, I will give an overview which is essential for understanding the application part. So I have divided my talk in this way. So first, I'll speak on theory part for 30 to 40 minutes. Then I'll take 2 to 3 minutes break to discuss if you have some queries. And then again I'll start. I'll discuss on applications part for 30 to 40 minutes. So this is the overview of the presentation. So first, starting with the introduction and motivation, I will discuss then some relevant concepts on multilinear algebra, followed by applications of tensor decompositions on biomedical signals. So here I would like to mainly focus on two types of signals, so-called ECG, electrocardiogram, and EMG, electromyogram, as a kind of guide. And yeah, today in the afternoon session, if you see the schedule, so there is another lecture on tensor-based applications, wherein Professor Purvala Buniadi from TU Delft will discuss on tensor-based applications, tensor-based signal processing on EEG applications, electroencephalogram, that is yeah, brain signals. Okay, so for the benefit of those who are having bandwidth issues, so I'll stop my presentation. Sorry. Video. For those, yeah, some people might have bandwidth constraints. Okay. So yeah, let's get started. So in this multimodal world, where real life data is literally of multimodal in nature, so this data traditionally is stored in either in a vector form or in matrix form, and these data are visualized, analyzed, or processed mode-wise. So before I tell you some examples of multimodal data, it is necessary to understand what multimodal does mean. And what do you mean by mode? So what multimodal means, it is characterized by several different modes of activity or occurrences. And what is a mode? A mode can be interpreted like, for example, source of information such as a user, patient, or trials, etc. Or it can be a type of entity attached to the data such as items or products, or a recording modality that captures diversity in various domains. It may be space or time or frequency or temperature or wavelength. Okay, so now, having all these definitions in mind, can you give me some examples of multimodal data? I'm hearing. So I told you the definitions of multimodal. What do we mean by multimodal data? So can you give me
the MRI scan data, sir?
Yes, but okay. Yes, yeah, MRI is yeah, multimodal data. Any other data that we see?
Sir, image capture through visible light as well as infrared light camera.
Okay, so which kind of image?
Natural image captured through ordinary camera as well as infrared camera, because infrared night vision, ordinary camera captures during day vision. So these two are totally of different modality, one during daytime, the other one during nighttime.
Yeah.
In BCI applications, they use modalities like EEG and FNIRS and EMG, EOG for measuring similar activities. So they could be considered multimodal data.
Exactly. So you have added yeah, many types: EEG, EOG, EMG. Yes. First, let's see some of the examples of multimodal data. So first, the multimodal data that comes to our mind is color images. So it's a, we can say it's a third order tensor with two spatial modes and one channel mode for RGB colors, or it can be video. It can be video, which can be considered as a fourth order tensor, where another extra mode is time. And also you can think of weather data wherein different parameters like temperature, rain, humidity, etc. are collected at different locations at different time instance. You can also think of physiological data or biomedical data. For example, multi-channel data. It's some of the case examples of EEG, EOG, or also it can be a similar kind of data, but it's multi-channel. It is collected in different time, and also you can you collected data of different person. Okay, so you can also include another one, that is frequency. Or it can be, if someone said it's MRI data, or you can consider it is a facial recognition problem. So you can also think of face recognition problems where we have images from different people taken in different conditions like illumination or pose or angle, etc. Or it can be like this, or it can be explaining where it can be for documents or authors. So basically what I mean to say is that the data we are surrounded of or we can think of are all multimodal in nature. Okay? But as I said earlier, traditionally the raw data is stored in either a vector or a matrix form and are processed more-wise. The question here is, can we process this multimodal data using the traditional methods like vector-based methods or matrix-based methods? Yes. Answer is yes. Yes, we can process more-wise. By unfolding the multimodal data into matrices, we can process this data. However, the so-called traditional vector or matrix-based methods do not take advantage of this multimodal. Okay, this so-called methods do not take advantage of this multimodal or higher order data structure, as they cannot capture multi-way couplings. So this means that some information about the interaction between modes may be lost during those traditional using those traditional approaches. And this is why today tensors play a central role in many fields of application, particularly in signal processing and machine learning for data representation or data compression or data analysis and mining or fusion and classification of data, and also in characterizing biomedical problems. And this is going to be the main goal of this talk. So that means how we can process multimodal data more efficiently and how we can get more and more meaningful information from this kind of data. Okay, so that's the main goal of this talk. How we can process this multimodal data. Because there are some limitations in this so-called vector or matrix-based methods. But before we see applications, it is very important to understand theoretical aspects behind it. So in this part, so let's first learn some basics on multilinear algebra. So as I said, I won't discuss the mathematical concepts extensively, though these are important and interesting, but I will not discuss, I will not go in depth. So what I'll do, I'll give just an overview of the matrix decompositions. I'll also discuss several classes of tensors, tensor operations, and two main and commonly used tensor decomposition such as CPD and MLFBD. CPD stands for, I haven't given, you see it. So it's a canonical polyadic decomposition and multilinear singular value decomposition. And finally, in this part, I will show a simple demo in MATLAB. So before we start on multilinear algebra, so let me first give a brief on different terminologies notation and definitions, because we are going to use these things throughout the lecture. Okay, so first with the fancy word of this lecture, tensor. What a tensor is? A tensor is nothing but a multimodal or multi-way array, or it's a higher order array. So that means it's a higher order generalization of scalar or vector or matrix. So that means we know some tensors already. So vector is a tensor of order 1, or you can say scalar is of order 0. Matrix is a tensor of order 2. And these are easy. We know already what is a scalar, what is a vector, and what is a matrix. And when this order n being 3 or higher, it gets more interesting or also complex. So here I have shown a here I have shown a third order tensor, and okay, so here you can see this is a third order tensor. So first one is a scalar, this is a column vector of order 1, this is of order 2, and this is a third order tensor. And beyond the order 3, it's difficult to draw. So we have just mathematical imagination, and it gets me harder to draw. But you understand what I'm talking about. So just mark the word. And another important thing is here, it's order. So here, what I want to say is that order is different than dimension. So generally, very often, what we say, you may find in paper or in book, it's a multi-dimensional tensor. So even if say a vector is of dimension 1 or a matrix is of dimension 2, so in my opinion, okay, so in mathematics people used to say, but from engineering point of view, matrix is of not dimension 2. It's not dimension. It's not a correct terminology, because a vector itself is a multi-dimensional. If there are n number of entities, then that's actually n-dimensional vector. So yeah, so this is the difference between order and dimension. So vector itself is a n dimension. Okay, so this should not be capital N, yeah, small n. That's the difference between order and dimension. But yes, in some books, in not some books, in many books in related to mathematics, linear algebra, or in papers also you will see that n-dimensional, because they say it's n-dimensional vector. So in my opinion, it's not a correct terminology. Rather, it's better to use a first order vector with n entities or n components. Okay. So a tensor is an nth order multi-way array that varies over n modes, and here I1, I2, and In. So these are dimensions. And elements of a tensor is denoted with the fixed indexes. So you can see here. So this is an element. So this is actually a third order tensor. You can see here order is n equal to 3, and these are the dimensions. And the elements, any element of elements of a tensor it is denoted with fixed indexes. And another terminology is mode, and these modes are analogous to the vectors. Okay. A mode in a tensor, however, is a vector that is obtained by fixing all indexes except the nth index. So if you say it's a mode 1 fiber or mode 1 vector, then okay, so from a third order tensor or a fourth order tensor or any order of tensor, so how can you get mode 1 fiber? So you have to fix the first order, first index. You have to fix, you have to vary the first order and fix all indexes. So it is obtained by fixing all indexes except the nth index. So here you can see, so it's a column vector. So here, yeah, from a third order tensor. So this is actually a third order tensor. So to get the fifth vector, or sorry, yeah, fifth column vector. So here you can see, so these two are fixed, where this is one index is varied, and to get a row vector, so this one is, second one is varying, whereas these two are fixed. Similarly, if you want to get mode 3 fiber, which is for third tensor we call it as a tube fiber. So this is actually column fiber, this is the row fiber, and this is the tube fiber. So here these two indexes are fixed, whereas this one is varying. Now next terminology is slices, and slices are similar to or analogous to matrices. So slices of a tensor are obtained by fixing all indexes, but two indexes are varied. Okay, so in case of fiber, one index is varying, so here two indexes are varying, and you have to fix the rest of the indexes. And a third order tensor has three types of slices. One is horizontal slices. You can imagine if you have a third order tensor like this. So if you see from the top view, you will see horizontal slices. If you see from front, you will see frontal slices. Or if you see from one of the sides, then you will get lateral slices. So in case of horizontal slices, so index I is fixed. Let's say I, J, K are indexes. Then for a horizontal slice, index I is fixed, and for vertical slice, vertical, or it is also called as lateral or vertical. So here index J is fixed, and for a frontal slices, it's index K is fixed. Similarly, if you have say a 10th order data and you want to retrieve a third order from it, then you need to vary three indexes and fix the rest. Just try to understand. So here I have a third order tensor. I want to retrieve a vector. So here I varied one index, whereas two other indexes are fixed. And similarly, if you want a slice from a third order tensor, so you have to vary two indexes. Similarly, if you have, let's say, a higher order, let's say 10th order, and you want to get a third order tensor from that one, so you have to vary three indexes and fix the rest of the indexes. I hope it's clear till now. Any doubt so far?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, here you have mentioned the tensor belongs to R, real space, I1 into I2 up to IN. Am I right, sir?
Yes.
That is the notation you have used. Now, how can you relate that I1, I2 with respect to capital I, J and K? How they are related, sir?
This is for general. So the tensor can be of nth order, but here I1 equal to I, J, I2 equal to J. This is for third order tensor.
So that N refers to the order. Am I right, sir?
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So for this one, here N equal to 3.
Thank you, sir.
Next one, another useful concept in tensor algebra is matricizations or unfolding of a tensor. So a tensor can be matricized by stacking or juxtaposing all fibers of a certain mode n in a matrix. So this is also known as the mode n unfolding or flattening of the tensor. And it is generally written as so it is because it's matrix form, so it's a bold letter with capital bold capital, and here you can see a subscript n within within bracket. Sorry, not subscript, it's a superscript. Okay, so the general notation for a matrix from a tensor means if you have obtained a matrix by unfolding a tensor, then this is the general notation. Okay, so it's a bold capital letter with superscript. So here if you write n which mode, and this is generally written within not working. So here you can see a number as subscript and a number as superscript within brackets. So subscript is to denote index, whereas superscript inside bracket is to denote mode number. So to denote vectors or matrices, so I may use two notations: simply boldface, smaller capital letters, or a boldface letter with a number as superscript inside brackets. Okay, now you can see matrices, how I have done matricization of a hardware tensor. So okay, so if you see from the font, so you can see these are actually mode 1 fibers, nothing but my column vectors. Or if you see from this side, one of the sides, then I will get row vectors, that is mode 2 fibers. And if I see from the top, then I will get mode 3 fibers, which are nothing but tube fibers. These are along this way. And by stacking all these vectors, so you will get matrix. Okay, so this is my matrix in first mode, this is matrix in second mode, this is matrix in third mode. Now another useful concept in this area is tensorization. So matricization is converting from tensor to matrix. Now this is tensorization. So how we can get a higher order data from second order data or from lower order data. So this is actually from matrix to tensor. So we can consider also so tensorization will itself take maybe 1 hour to discuss, but because of the time constraint, I will not give details on tensorization. But okay, I will tell you how you can construct a tensor from a matrix. If you have a lower order data, say a vector or a matrix, how you can construct it? How you can set a third order data or a higher order data. So it can be a set of data matrices recorded at different time under different conditions, or by careful tensorization of data matrix, let's say time frequency. If you have only multi-signal data that is recorded in different time, then how you can get a third order data? So you can find the frequency of each channel and you can place in the third order. Or you can use wavelet, or you can Henkel the matrix, Henkelization, that is called Henkelization. So these are different ways you can construct, or you can construct a higher order data from lower order data. Or also you can use higher order statistics. So next concept here is products. So we'll see here 3 to 4 types of products that we use in this field. First one is tensor product. So this is also called as outer product. Okay. So tensor product of a generally it should be actually Generally, I denote tensors in calligraphic letter. It should be actually tensor form. It's not a bold capital letter. It's typo. This is not a matrix. This is actually tensor. So tensor product of 2 tensors. Okay, so A belongs to this one. It is n dimensions. I1 to In, and here B has dimensions J1 to J. and the product is like this. So to denote tensor product, so in literature you will find a small dot, or you can see this kind of structure, a round structure. Inside that you will find a square. But we will use this one. But these two are used intertextually in literature. But can anyone give me a simple example of a tensor product? Can anyone give me a simple example of a tensor product?
Sir, a Kronecker product.
That's what I have written here, but I am asking a simple example. Okay, simple one is tensor product or outer product between two vectors. So I have two vectors A and B. So it's A, B. Where these two are vectors of these two are vectors. So this is equal to A, B transpose. Or pictorial, I can write like this: A, and this is B. So a rank 1. Okay. So if I take multiplication, so here you can see how this multiplication is being done. So it's actually element wise multiplication. So each or every element of A is multiplied with every element of B. Okay. So if say here actually order of A is n and order of B is m, then can anyone tell me what will be the order of C? It's n plus m, right? It will be n plus m. So if you consider here is a simple example. So rank 1 matrix. Okay, so let me write here rank 1 matrix. So if you multiply or if you take outer product or tensor product of two vectors, this is nothing but so A, this is my A vector, this is my B vector, and you will get a matrix whose rank is 1. Okay, so this is a simple or simplest form of an outer product or a tensor product. Okay, so next one is it's a Kronecker product. So it's actually multiplication Kronecker product. It's a multiplication of two matrices of different dimensions. Dimensions can be same. So here you can see it's I1 cross I2. The dimension of A is this one and B is this one. So finally, the dimension of Kronecker product of A and B is I1 I3 cross I2 I4. So here, first element, all elements of A is multiplied with, if each and every element of A is multiplied with B. And this is the dimension. And another product that we will see is that Khatri-Rao product. So here you can see here the dimension of A is I1 cross R and dimension of B is I2 cross R. That means the dimension, the second dimension, or I can say it's the column dimension is the column one. So this must be same. So here each element of this is actually a Kronecker product of each vector of A and B. You can see here. This is nothing but a Kronecker product. Another product that we will see, that is the n-mode product, mode and product or n-mode product. So this is a multiplication or a product between a tensor and a matrix. Okay. So here each mode and fiber of X is multiplied with A. Okay. Is there any doubt? till now we are discussing some terminologies, some notations and some products. Any doubt? Okay, so we have now some basic terminologies, definitions, products in hand. Now let me discuss on matrix decompositions. So it's a real challenge from where to start a presentation on matrices, given that it's a very vast area. But okay, I have to start. So here I want to discuss the different decomposition algorithms available in literature or in the textbooks. Rather, I will discuss two important concepts related to matrices, and then I will generalize it to higher order data structure, that is the tensor. So matrix decomposition or matrix factorization is the act of decomposing a larger matrix into the product of two or more matrices of smaller dimensions. So you know that matrix decomposition are used for decades, and decades is a very powerful tool in many applications that include, for example, dimensional reduction to extract information contained in large datasets using constrained low-rank matrix approximations, or separation of relevant correlated sources from noise, or for artifact removal from physiological signals using blind source separation problem, where unknown source signals are linearly mixed, or using data science applications. So let me consider here the PSS problem. So the other day, 2 days before, Professor Savin Dhanukal explained what PSS problem is using each signals nicely. And similarly, let me consider for simplicity 3 signals that are mixed linearly, and the resultant is in the mixer matrix X. So in other words, so mixer X represents the linear combination of underlying sources S. So the task of the PSS problem is to estimate the source matrix S and the mixing matrix M from X. Okay, the task of the PSS problem, the goal is to estimate the source matrix. Estimate the source matrix and the mixing matrix from capital X. And if there is no prior information on the matrices M or S, then they can never be uniquely identified from X. Try to understand this point. So our goal is to estimate the source matrix and the mixing matrix from M, from capital X, which is known to us. So we know X, but we don't know M and S. They are linearly combined. That is in X. But our objective is to estimate these two. So if there is no prior information on M or S, then they can never be uniquely identified from X. You cannot find it. So BSS or blind source separation in general does not have a unique solution, because you can see here X equal to MS, and so X is also equal to M tilde and S tilde. So here you can see matrix multiplication of M and S, or M tilde and S tilde give the same output X, and this is true for any matrix decomposition case. So you can never estimate unknown matrices uniquely just by decomposing a larger matrix unless you impose some constraints. Let me repeat again. You can never estimate unknown matrices uniquely just by decomposing a larger matrix unless you impose some constraints or assumptions. And for unique, we impose some extra constraints to get a unique solution. So I can impose orthogonality, and then BSS blind source separation problem comes down to PCA. And if you assume sources are statistically independent, then BSS comes down to ICA. or if you assume sources are uncorrelated and of different autocorrelation degree, then it boils down to CCA problem like this. So until and unless you impose some constraint or you assume priori, then it's difficult. It's impossible to estimate the source matrix or separate the source matrix and mixing matrix from the known matrix X. So I like, okay, so let me now, okay, so is there any doubt so far? Okay, so I think that there are no doubts. Just what I'm saying is that, what I'm stressing here is that in general, BSS, I mean matrix decomposition is not unique. So let's now move to another topic. So today's topic of today's talk, that is tensors. So to start on this topic, I again start from the matrix from the concept on rank. So let us understand what a rank 1 matrix is. I've already told you it's the outer product or tensor product of two vectors u and v. So here the rank of the matrix, the rank of the resultant will be 1. Because it's nothing but a linear combination of first vector, or you are just multiplying element wise of two vectors. Similarly, for our tensor, rank 1 tensor is the outer product of 3 vectors. Similarly, you can think of rank R matrix for tensor. It's just linear combination of R terms. This is actually rank 1 matrix. This is a rank R. So if you take linear combination of R terms like this, then the rank of this matrix will be R. This is the rank R matrix. This is the rank R tensor. First, let me define what we mean by rank of a matrix or a tensor. So can anyone, okay, before I tell you, can anyone tell me how can you define a rank?
Is the number of independent rows or columns of a matrix.
Okay, yes. Any other answer? Yeah, that's true. It's a number of independent rows or columns. Yes, and is there any other way you can find the rank of a matrix?
So conventional way is 1 by determinant of A into adjoint of A.
Okay, yeah.
That will give you a rank, inverse, that will give you inverse. So rank defines how the rows or columns are linearly independent, because linear independence of the vector will help us to span the space. So spanning, it helps. So in that way, for example, any DFT matrix, the rank will be equal to the order. So whenever the rank of the matrix is equal to order, then it shows that they are linearly independent.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. But okay, so have you heard of singular value decomposition?
Yes, sir. Because eigen decomposition is applicable only for a square matrix. So if we have a rectangular matrix, how to decompose it? By taking the transpose. So we are indirectly converting a rectangular matrix to a square matrix through SVD.
No, but using SPD, you can apply SPD to any matrix. You can be
yes.
Can be rectangular matrix. But here, what I'm telling you is that rank can also be found by finding the number of non-zero singular values. The number of non-zero singular values also tell you, or tell you the rank of the matrix. Okay. Anyway, so let me. So there are literally many ways we can define rank. So for example, we can define the rank of a matrix in these two ways. So first one is the minimal number of rank 1 matrices that you need to reconstruct the matrix X, or it's the number of linearly independent rows or columns. This is nothing but the dimension of the row space or column space of X. And you know that both both definitions are in another way equivalent in case of matrix. So things are simple up to order 2, that is matrix case, but they get complicated as we increase the order. So we are slowly building up. Okay, now these two definitions lead to different concepts if we move from matrices to tensors. The first concept leads to CPD, that is the canonical polyadic decomposition, which decompose a tensor into a minimum number of rank 1 tensors. And this minimal number is called as the rank of it's called as the tensor rank. So here you can see the tensor is the sum of rank 1 tensors. So this is actually, this will give you rank 1. Here actually this is the rank R. If R is the rank of the tensor, then it's the sum of rank 1 tensors of R terms. And the very nice property of tensor decomposition is that under some mild conditions. Okay, so when I told you that matrix decompositions are not unique without additional constraints or without imposing some additional extra constraints. Matrix decompositions are not unique. Whereas because of this property, is canonical, because of this property, tensor decompositions we can so tensor decompositions, the nice property of tensor decompositions is that under some mild conditions these are unique, and uniqueness means interpretable. So that means if you observe something along any mode, then that is there in the data along that particular mode. And that is very, very useful, certainly when you want to use this information in clinical practices. So for a hardware tensor, this uniqueness is given by Kruskal's condition, and so this is the condition. This is the Ka plus Kp plus Kc. This is for hard order tensor, that is greater than equal to 2r plus 2. So where Ka, I mean A, you can see. So this is actually nothing but the matrices. The matrix that is obtained by collecting these vectors A1, A2, AR vectors, and B is nothing but the vector, the matrix that is constructed by collecting row vectors of R terms, and similarly for C. And Ka is nothing but kth rank of A, this is kth rank of B, this is kth rank of C, and this sum, if this condition satisfied, then under mild conditions, tensor decompositions are unique. So what do you mean by mild conditions? In the relaxed conditions, the relaxed conditions, tensor decompositions are unique. So you can uniquely estimate the underlying things inside the tensor. Next one, the second definition of rank. This is nothing but the number of linearly independent rows or columns, and this is actually this is same, means in case of matrix the rank, I mean number of linearly independent rows or columns are same in case of matrices. Yes or no? If you find a row rank or column rank, both are same. In case of matrices, both are same, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, if we move from matrices to tensors, this concept leads to LMLRA, that is low multilinear rank approximation, which decomposes tensor into a core tensor. If you see here, X is my tensor, so it decomposes. Okay, so here actually it's I consider. Okay, let us consider it's of nth order. This is nth order. So it decomposes a tensor into a core tensor and vector matrices. If it's of nth order, then you get n vector matrices, And similarly for a third order tensor, you can see, so it decomposes, if you decompose this tensor using LM-LRA, then you will get 1 core tensor and 3 vector matrices. This is for column vectors, mode 1, this is for mode 2, and this is for mode 3. So what I mean to say is that here, in case of, so unlike the matrix case where both row rank and column rank are same, in case of if you move from matrix or from second order data to higher order data, then we have different concept of rank, that is multilinear rank. So it is defined by ranks of vector matrices. So it is defined by ranks of vector matrices. Now you have, for example, if you have harder data, you have 3 vector matrices. So in other words, unlike to the matrix case, ranks along different modes need not be same along different modes in case of a higher order tensor. So let me consider one example. So this is the example. I have a higher tensor. So these are my elements. Now if you see here, what is the rank of this one? Along the first mode. Okay, so I have already written here it's 2, because if you see my elements are 1 0 0 1, again 1 0 and 0 1. Okay, so if you see rank is 2, and if you see along mode 2, that is means row vectors. So my elements are again 1 0 0 1 1 0 0 1. That means again the rank is 2. But if you see along,
sorry, excuse me, sir. Sir, voice has break. Can you explain how the rank R1 equal to 2, sir?
Okay, yeah. So if you see here, now actually I am finding the rank along mode 1. So my elements are, it's 1 0 1 0, again 0 1. So what you have to do is we have to flatten this tensor into a matrix. So my elements, if you find the, okay, just like this. We have to find the rank of this one. Okay. My vector matrix will be 1 0 0 1. This is 1 0, then 0 1, then again 1 0 0 1. Yes. Now if you find the rank of this one, this is 2. Similarly, if I find the rank from the mode 2 perspective, then it will be again 1 0 1 0. Again it's 0 1, and again it's 1 0, then 0 1. Okay. Now if I find the rank from third mode.
This is rank 2.
No, this is rank 2. Here also rank 2. But if I see this one along along the third mode, Q fibers, then it is my elements are
1 1 0 0 1 1 0 0.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we're talking. Okay, so it's 1 1 0 0 0 0 1 1. So here it's the rank is 1. So as I said, so ranks along different modes are not same. So we have different concepts of rank, that is multilinear rank. So rank along different modes can be different, and the nice property on rank about this one is, okay, so for third order tensor, R1 is less than equal to R2, R3. It is bounded by, rank along any mode is bounded by products of rank along the 2. So this is about third order. For higher frequency, yeah. So there are some boundary conditions that you for that actually for cycles. And now if you see, if you make it to matrix case, this is also true. If you consider there is no R3, I mean there are no elements along R1, then if R3 will be equal to 1, then if it's for matrix case it will be same. I mean this also Felix. So R1 is less than or equal to R2. Similarly, R2 will be less than or equal to R1. That means for matrix case, R1 is equal to R2. Okay. Any doubts till now? Done. Okay. So now actually I will show you one example in MATLAB. So let me consider one example as with a function of. So here I show how effective tensor decomposition is for higher order data. So I am going to consider a function, basically a spatial function in x and y directions, and that is changing in time. So here my sample function is in two modes. So in other words, I can say that the two different fundamental features, or you call it is a rank 2 decomposition, where I am going to mix those two together. And the question here is, when I do the decomposition, let's say CPD, can I get back two constitutional parts from it? Okay. So here these two are my functions. Now you can see these two are in spatial function in x and y directions, and here actually it is multiplied by cos 2t. This is by sin t. That is it is changing in time. So now let me show you my MATLAB. Okay. So I hope my MATLAB window is visible to you. Yes. Can you see my MATLAB window?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. So here you can see these two are my functions. I have mixed this. I have added these two. Here you can see. Okay. So first I have defined x, y, t. X is from -5 to 5. Y is from -6 to 6. Or should I increase the font of?
It's visible, sir.
Okay. So t is from let's say 0 to 5. Okay, with an increment of 0.1. Now here actually I have I used to make grid of x, y, and t. So here that means there is a three-dimensional structure built in them. Now here I defined two functions f1 and f2. Which is here t to the power minus x square plus 0.5 square into cos 2t. Okay, so like this. So now, and I have added this two. So let me first show you. So let me show you just first how f1 looks like. So first one you can see it's a spatial function, a Gaussian type, and it oscillates in time. Okay, and now let me show you the second one. Second one, if you see here, this is actually a multiplication of sec hyperbolic tangent, and this is 10x. Okay. And now these two are multiplied with a Gaussian type, e to the power minus 0.2 y square. Let me run it again. So this is my second function. But now the question is, I have mixed these two and the result is in my F. Okay. Now the question, let me comment these two. I hope you have seen these two examples, sorry, two functions. But here I will use CPD, so you won't find this one in MATLAB. So I have used package TensorLab, but in the last previously, I mean 2 days before Sabin said it's the TensorLab. Yeah, I used TensorLab package. So there you will find this one CPD. So here, basically what I'm saying is I have given the input F. Now my algorithm, my factorization algorithm doesn't know what F contains. So here I've just given input F, and okay. So here I know that okay. So I know the rank of this structure is 2. So that's why I directly gave it's 2. Now let me see whether I can able to pull out these two factors F1 and F2 from capital F. Oh. Okay, so now you can see. So how beautifully my CPD algorithm able to pull out those two factors. So here you can see, these are the two Gaussian rank functions in y direction. Okay, so in y direction you can see it's from -6 to 6, and this is from -5 to 5. Okay, so that's for the first one. So if you see here in y direction, I have two Gaussians. One is e to the power minus 0.5 square, and another one is e to the power minus 0.2 square. So you can see one is for minus 0.5 square, and another one is this. In y direction, I have two Gaussians, and x direction it is e to the power minus x square multiplied with these two. So yeah. No, I have got these two factors in x direction, and in time axis I have two functions. One is cos of 2t and another one is sin of t. So here you can see, this is sin of t. This is sin of t, and this is cos 2t. So duration is half. How beautifully my algorithm. See in my, if you see here, I haven't given anything on F1 and F2. I just gave the input F, that is capital F. I mean my mixing matrix, not mixing matrix. It's a mixture of F1 and F2, and I gave a value that is rank. Here I know that okay, I have two components, but here in case of tensor problems, the crucial point is to estimate the rank value. Any doubt in this one? So this is just a very simple simple program. But behind what I'm trying to say is that how beautifully my tensor decomposition able to pull out the two factors that is hidden inside capital F. So that's the power of tensor decomposition. Yes, sir. Any doubt so far? audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any doubts so far? I'm running out of time, so I may not take a break, but I'll continue. But if you have any doubt till now, yeah, you can ask me. Okay. So as I told you, the main thing, the crucial part here is to estimate the rank of your pencil. Okay. Now we'll discuss the applications of tensor decomposition in biomedical signal processing. So as I told you, I will mainly focus on two types of signals, so-called ECG and EMG. So in an increasingly digitized world, rapid advances in sensor technology allow us to make a lot of physiological recordings in terms of duration, in terms of number of sensors or channels, or heterogeneous data. And this keeps growing at an unprecedented rate. These physiological recordings allow us to record patients having a lot of pathologies ranging from cardiac diseases such as arrhythmia, sudden cardiac death, to brain diseases such as stress, sleep problems, or chronic diseases, or any problems related to other organs. But what we need, in fact, are algorithms or methods which are able to store the raw data and transform them into explainable or interpretable information from clinical diagnostic context. So we'll see this from tensor point of view, not from vector or matrix point of view, because as I told, the traditional algorithms do have certain limitations. They are incapable of capturing multi-way couplings or multimodal data. So here I'll discuss three ECG-based applications such as compression, myocardial infarction classification, and irregular heartbeat classification using tensor decomposition CPD and MLSPD. That is canonical polyadic decomposition and multilinear singular value decomposition. So I'll focus on, as I will focus on ECG. So let me first explain what ECG is. So this means electrocardiogram. So yesterday, Professor Samranandan Bhatt has explained. He has given insights on ECG. So let me tell you in brief. Our heart is a beating muscle that pumps oxygen and nutrient-rich blood throughout the body over a period of time. Doctors perform a test known as the ECG to examine the function of heart. So it measures the electrical activity of the heart. It is cheap and widely available and also quick to measure. So it is a non-invasive tool where electrodes are placed over the surface of body. And if you see an ECG, sure, all of you must have seen an ECG somewhere in movies, somewhere in hospital or somewhere. So you will see this kind of picture. So diagnostic features of an ECG signal are P wave, QRS complex, ST segment, T wave. T wave refers atrial contraction. I think I no need to explain again because yesterday Sir has already told you. So a single lead ECG gives only one look at a time and misses the vital information from other parts of the heart. And a single lead ECG is not sufficient to analyze the spatio-temporal dynamics during some cardiac diseases. So in clinical practice, the doctors use multi-lead ECG to get detailed information of heart. So multiple number of electrodes are used. For example, 3 lead or 5 lead or 12 lead ECG. The standard 12 leads are generally used because they give minute inspection of the heart. So you can see here how electrodes are placed over body, and each lead, each electrode or each lead views the heart from different angles. For example, lead 1, lead V3 and V4, they view the anterior wall of the heart, anterior wall of the right and left ventricles, lead 2, 3, and AVL, they view the inferior surface of the heart, and V1 and V2 view the space septal surface of the heart, and 1, AVL, DF, D5, and D6, they view the lateral wall of left ventricle. So in clinical practice, the standard 12 leads are analyzed, processed for various purposes, like for dimensional reduction, for fetal extraction, classification, or for cardiac risk identification, etc. And a number of methods have been proposed for these applications. And this can broadly classified as vector-based or matrix-based methods. So in vector-based methods, either a single heartbeat or a single ECG lead is processed, whereas in matrix-based methods, though it is possible to analyze multiple number of ECG signals, simultaneous analysis of multiple channels and heartbeats is not possible. So we propose the use of tensors to study the structural information that is present in multi-lead ECG channels, or I can say in other words, it simultaneously analyzes channels and heartbeats. So to apply, as I told you earlier in the second part, to apply tensor decomposition, it is necessary to tensorize the data at the very first step. Because you know, multi-lead ECG, naturally it's in matrix form, so we have to tensorize the data. So yeah, as I told you, this one's single lead ECG. You can think it is of a vector form. Multi-lead ECG, it's a space cross time. It is of matrix form. Or if you have a single lead ECG, you can segment ECG signal in heartbeats. You can consider it as of matrix form. Okay. Now we have tensors. So we have multi-lead ECG, and you need extra dimension. So you can consider as heartbeat or something like frequency. If you have single lead, so heartbeat plus time plus some extra dimensions like frequency. So tensorization is one of the important steps here. So these are the tensorization of ECG signal. How we tensorize the ECG signal? We have multi-lead ECG and 12-lead ECG. So we segmented. So after segmentation of ECG signal, so into different segments, then we just juxtaposed all heartbeats in third order. So you can see it's a leads or channels cross samples cross number of beats, number of heartbeats. Okay, so these are some of the works related to ECG applications using tensor decomposition. And due to shortage of time, it's difficult to discuss all, but I will discuss a few. So yeah, first one is irregular heartbeat classification using CPD. So irregular heartbeats are those whose duration or shape or amplitude of P wave or pure complex of P wave is significantly different than the normal values. So here objective is to identify irregular heartbeats from normal ones. So here actually we used a database from INCAR 12-lead ECG arrangement database, and we implemented this algorithm on 10 signals. So we did like on all signals. So we had this many number of normal heartbeats and this many number of abnormal heartbeats. Okay, coming to the methods. So after pre-processing, then we did tensorization. Okay, then we applied CPD. So in this case, the rank of the decomposition is chosen as 1 because we are interested in the main variation between different heartbeats. So this results in 1 an endpoint tensor consisting of 3 loading vectors, L1, L2, and L3. And these vectors map the 3 dimensions of the original tensor. The first loading vector, it corresponds to the time dimension that shows the average heartbeat over all heartbeats. I'll show you in the next slide. And the second loading vector, that is L2, it is associated with different heartbeat morphologies in different channels, and L3 corresponds to the heartbeats dimension. So here we can observe the irregular heartbeats. Here you can see. Okay, so here I've shown. These are actually different heartbeats. So the red ones are normal heartbeats. So these are actually annotated in the database. And the blue ones, blue heartbeats, these are actually abnormal heartbeats. So here we can observe the irregular heartbeats from normal heartbeats by studying or the heart loading vector. So when a heartbeat significantly different from the mean heartbeat, the mean heartbeat is not L3, so this can be noticed in the heartbeat vector. Okay. And so for this actually we used a detection decision. So this is the thresholding rule. Okay. So if L3 is greater than the threshold value, then it is denoted as, or it is denoted as abnormal. So here you can see using that decision, using the threshold rule, so it's clearly able to identify the abnormal heartbeats. Here you can see this is L1, first loading vector. There is nothing but okay, so if you consider the signal number of these beats, if I remember, processed 20 or 25 heartbeats in one frame. So this is the mean heartbeat, and this is the second loading vector that corresponds to channels, and this is the third loading vector. And using that threshold formula, so you can see for beat number 4, then maybe for beat number 6 or 7, you can see these values are very high. And yeah, so these are red ones for heartbeat, I mean for normal ones, and these values are for abnormal ones. So that means 4th one, then 6th one, then 10th one, then perhaps the 21st or something like that are abnormal heartbeat. And here also you can see 4th one, then 6th one is also an abnormal heartbeat, then 7th, 10th one is again an abnormal heartbeat that you can see here. So, yeah, so this is the parameter specificity and sensitivity. Any doubt in this application? Sir, I may need some more time, maybe 15 minutes to complete. May I, sir?
Yeah, please, no issues.
Maybe 10 minutes more.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. Now let me discuss another problem, that is compression. Here, this is the block diagram. What has been published in this article, 2015. Okay. So here, after pre-processing, after segmentation and period alignment, so we got the hard order data, hard order tensor. Then we applied discrete Wavelet transform. Okay, so what is this? We are running out of time. Okay, so let me just tell you. So here, multi-scale analysis. So yesterday, sir already told you what multi-scale analysis is. Professor and actually, sir. So why we applied multi-scale? We applied multi-scale analysis on ECG because ECG signal itself is multiscale in nature. So you can see components of ECG signal, they differ in time scales and also with the different frequency. Okay. So given a signal which is sample rate with frequency fs, then we have to decompose. Here again we have to set a decomposition level. First, so here for ECG signal to determine what should be the decomposition level, then there is a well-known formula is that L equal to log 2. Don't write this one, log base 2 fs minus 2.96. So this is a well-known formula to set the or to find the decomposition level, and this outputs L plus 1 number of subbands, 1 approximation subband, and L number of detailed subbands. Okay, so like this, so you get one approximation subband and L number of decomposition, L number of detailed subbands, and this is the frequency band for each subband. Why I use this one? So here actually I applied tensor decomposition on wavelet coefficients, not on reconstructed signal at different level, but on wavelet coefficients. Because if you see, wavelet coefficients are also correlated. So these are actually wavelet coefficients. If you see the dimension, so here actually, if I remember correctly, I used 1000 number of samples in my raw data, and you can see the number of coefficients in different subbands. Okay, for example, in D2 it's the sampling frequency was 1000 hertz. Yeah. So 500, then it's reduced to 250, then 120, yeah, 120 or something like that. So in every subband, it is reduced by half. I'm going to get a bit faster. So that's why I applied tensor decomposition on wavelet coefficients. So here you can see, okay, so now I have L plus 1 number of tensors, and I applied MLSPD, that is multilinear singular value decomposition, on each tensor. And then this is the threshold formula to estimate or to find ranks along different modes. This is the formula used, and also we compared the results with available in literature. So here you can see we got a good CR value. Here you can see it's 45. I mean the raw data is being compressed up to 45 times. Okay, so here you can see also we used Hoffman encoding, quantization and Hoffman encoding. I will not discuss that one. Okay. And these are the different diagnostic distortion measures. These are also good. And the good thing about this tensor decomposition is that so these methods, the available methods in the literature at that time, they able to exploit a specific type of correlation, intra-bit or inter-bit or interlead. But this method, because of its property, so it is able to find the structural information that is part. So it is able to exploit all three types of correlation present in multi-lead ECG, and that is the reason why we achieved this first compression. So this is for this is an example showing tensor dimension using method. Okay, so you can see this is the original dimension, expected dimension. Okay, this is the dimension of the raw data. This is the expected dimension. These are the actual dimensions due to rank property. And after applying the thresholding formula, we got this one. Now we compare the values. So by sample wise, we achieved a reduction of around 11:1. I mean, we are able to compress the data by 11 times. But after applying Huffman encoding, we received or we achieved up to 45 times. And sample-wise reduction using other two methods, using multi-scale PCA, it is 1.45, and using multi-scale SPD, it is 6.22, whereas using tensor decomposition, it is 11.1, 11:1. Okay. And these are the original and compressed signals. Next one is next application is the myocardial infarction classification. I will not go till in this one. So here the objective is to not only detect whether myocardial infarction is there or not, but also to localize where myocardial infarction is there. So here this is the algorithm. Okay, so up to this much the algorithm, steps remain same. Then we used two features. So one is singular values. Okay, so singular values along different modes, and another one is the normalized mean wavelet energy features. So these features are used, and this is the consideration matrix. Okay, so this is the classification performance. So no overfitting and within overfitting. So everything is given here. So we achieved almost similar kind of performance. Summary. The Tharad tensor uses and analyzes the information from multiple cardiac cycles and multiple leads simultaneously. And we achieved outstanding compression ratio of approximately 45 times, and also we achieved accuracy, comparative accuracy for myocardial infarction classification. And we observed that using the CPD method, we are able to classify or identify irregular heartbeats from the normal ones. So tensor-based methods outperforms better than vector or metric-based methods. Next application is related to hand gesture recognition. I will take 5 minutes to complete this. So gestures are an important aspect of human interaction, both interpersonally and in the context of man-machine interfaces. A gesture is a non-verbal communication in which visible part of the body communicates a particular message. And hand gesture recognition is one obvious way to create a useful, highly adaptive interface between machines and their users. It allows operations using only a series of finger and hand movements, and we don't need for physical contact between operator and machine. So here the objective is to just recognition from reduced number of channels. So quickly, so here I'll tell you the method I used. Okay, so we have multiple number of EMG signals. Okay, so it's channels across time, and we have the number of gestures, and also we have data from different subjects. So now we have a fourth order tensor. So here the first step is to create a tensor. So this is how we created it. So here actually I used segmentation technique to convert second order matrix to fourth order. Third order. Then by appending the data from subjects, it's fourth order. Then the tensor is modeled using MLSPD, so which results in a 4 tensor and 4 factor matrices. Okay. So this is up to this much it's simple. Then let's come to testing phase. Testing phase. Now given the model and factor matrices, question here is how to recognize a new gesture, say Q, using a channel as a P. So this is computed by solving Kronecker product equations. Now let me discuss how we did that. So I can rewrite the previous this MLS3 equation like this. So for a particular channel and a particular gesture, so this represents the time information. Here this vector is u, this vector is this is u subscript p and transpose. This is the w subscript q transpose. So this u v w x they represent u for channels, v for times, w for gesture, and x for subject space. So next, for an unseen data, for a new unseen data, now what you could do is create a tensor and apply MLS3. Now, if every gesture of a channel can be expressed as a KPE, that is Kronecker product equation. Now, a new gesture. Now, we make new gesture is Q dash, and we want to from a channel P dash. A new gesture Q dash from a channel P dash, it can be recognized by solving this KPE, this Kronecker product equation. So what we basically do here is we find the coefficient vectors in the multilinear subspace P, and the solution of this equation. It gives the estimates. UP bar and WQ bar, and this they express the new data in the channel and gesture subspace. Now what we have to do is we have to compare these coefficients UP bar and WQ bar with the rows of U and W. Okay, compare the coefficients these with the rows of U and W, and depending on the closest match, the levels are assigned. So the rows of U and W along with the levels were used as the training database, and the coefficients UP bar and WQ bar, and they are used as the testing input features. So we used STM, Kennen, and three-variable classifiers. And how do you perform the experiments? Intersection, and intersubject. In intersection, so here classification model is created by training a part of the data of a subject from one session, and testing of the model that is performed on another part from that same session. And in intersection, the experiment was conducted by training on a set of sessions data of a subject and testing on another set of sessions from that subject. And here intersubject, here model was created by training data from a set of subjects and testing on another set of subjects. Okay. So that means that there is no overlapping of data on the train and test sets. Okay, so these are the three databases we used for this work. Yeah, so you can see from this MINAPRO, there are 27 subjects, 52 gestures from 10 electrodes, and here actually we get data from 5 subjects performing 27 gestures, and it is number of electrodes, so 198, but 24 are not being used, so we used only 168 electrodes. Okay, and in this database, so it has 3 sub databases, DBA, DBB, and DBC. It's 128 channels. Now coming to the results. The first intersection results. So in this figure you can see it is scatter plot between first vector and second vector. So here I have plotted the first vectors versus the second vectors of trained W matrix. Okay, of 8 gestures. So you can see that we can observe that the vector distribution of these gestures, so they show a clear separability, clear separation. Okay, so here you can see that levels Okay, this is one, this is yeah, two. You can see a clear separation. Of intersection. Next, this is for this is also for intersection. This is for one instance for with the performance and here you can see accuracy. So yeah, I will not go in detail. But I suggest you, if you are interested, you can go to the paper. The paper you can see it's published recently in this year in Central Journal. Refer this paper. Next one, this is the intersection results. Here also we compared results with two methods. Yeah, it's Amma method and using one method where they used the convolutional network. Okay, I will not go in detail. And these are inter-subject results. Inter-subject results. Okay, I will not go in detail with the results because of the time. Now here actually I will just tell you how you determine the accuracy. So this is important here. So in this figure I will show you how the accuracy values across the experiments were taken. So here you can see in the left, this figure shows the recognition accuracy of a randomly chosen segment during intersection. Okay. So the original level of the shown segment is gesture 2. Okay. So we can observe that most of the channels, if I remember exactly, it's around 49 or 50 channels out of 120 channels, they recognize it as gesture 2 and with the best accuracy of 97.3%. And although a set of channels shows this, it's not always true that the same set of channels will show similar results for the same gesture across the segments. And if you can see, the next most of channels is 24. They identify this segment as gesture 3. This may be due to the similar type of muscle movements in both gestures. So finally, it will be leveled at gesture 2 based on the number of outcomes. So here, for number 2, I think 50 out of 128 channels, they say okay, it's from channel 2, whereas 24 or 28 channels, they say it is from level 3. Sorry, gesture 3. But here it will finally, because of the number of outcomes, it is assigned as level 2 or gesture 2, and similarly for others. So now coming to the summary, so features from gesture subspace are potentially effective for hand gesture recognition, and also we saw that MLSTT based method performs better. Or but in case of intersection, the results are in line with the state of the art based method. Whereas for intersubject session, MLS based method performs better than the state of the art method. And the new directions or challenges. So this is actually a pilot study what I have done. So channel optimization is one thing we need to improve, and also interpretability. Yeah, how we can extract interpretable features using MLPD or CPD or other kind of telephone decomposition techniques. That those challenges are there. So with this, I will stop. Yeah, I took almost 1 hour and 45 minutes. Okay. Yeah, I'll stop my presentation. So if you have any questions, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sibsinkar. You took us through different representations of electrocardiogram ECG signal in terms of tensors, and also you showed us like how to apply different classification techniques on that, and sort of different applications, and also the publication material. It was an elaborate talk, so I request audience, like if they have any questions, please ask, or you can drop that in the chat box as well, your questions.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir. Sir, basically you are forming the tensor and then you're decomposing by higher order SBD or MLSBD.
Yes.
So there are is any alternative approach of a higher order SBD? You are actually you are using the same higher order SBD or MLSBD. So
Yeah, sir.
what are the alternative approach for higher SBD?
As I said, you can use CPD, that is canonical polyadic decomposition, or PTD, that is block term decomposition. Okay, so and also block term decomposition, that is BTD, block term decomposition, that is little bit advanced or complex than MLSPD. So these two are there, CPD and BTD.
Okay, sir, my second question is actually you are in SBD, in higher order SBD, you are approximating the tensor into a low dimension core tensor. So is there any loss of information like some you are mentioning interbit or intrabit information? Is there any loss of information in this decomposition?
Whenever we do any kind of approximation, there will be, definitely there will be some loss of information. That's it. But we have to minimize that. So for that, actually, we have to choose the range in such a way that there will be, the distortion in the reconstructed signal will be very less or acceptable. Yes.
Okay. It will depend on rank. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
So the most important or crucial part in tensor decomposition is estimation of range, tensorization and estimation of range. Else it's very easy.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
There were few questions in the chat box.
Yeah, but sorry guys, I took a lot of time. Because why I took time is the reason is that in the afternoon session we are going to have another talk. It's going to be another beautiful session. So Professor Borgola Kunyadi, he will explain from easy applications. So that's why I started. I gave you basics on this one. So he will focus. He will give a little intro on basics. He will not focus more on basics but on advanced topics. That's why I took more time on explaining the basics. Will you set the record? Yes.
Yeah, any other questions, please? Else. Yeah, if there are no more questions, I think we can. He's asking for link and attendance.
That they will get.
That anyway they'll be getting it. So if there are no more questions, thank you, Dr. Sipsankar, for this wonderful session. So we'll have around 5 to 6 minutes of break, and then the next session would start.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.